Welcome to my video series on the heroine's journey. I'm Susanna Liller, and it's time to find your happiness. So, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Can you guess where I was this past weekend? New York City, Broadway, occupying really great seats in the Lena Horne Theater with my daughter and granddaughter, watching the hit musical Six. We loved it. All three of us loved it. In case you don't know, it's about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. We all know his name, right? Actually, as the show clearly lets us know, the only reason we even have a vague sense of his wives passed down through history is because of him, because he married them. All the books, the TV series, the movies are always about Henry, his life. And his wives, he disposed of them, most of them. Catherine of Aragon, divorced. Anne Boleyn, beheaded. Jane Seymour, died. Anna of Cleves, divorced. Catherine Howard, beheaded. Catherine Parr, died. So we remember them because of his story and what he did to them, not because of their stories. But this fabulous musical changes that. Here we are remembering them right now. You and I were remembering those 6 women, and we're not even talking about Henry. Written by 2 young collaborators, Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss, the musical won a Tony Award in 2022. And just the story of how they wrote the play, the musical, and then got it on the stage for a student performance in Edinburgh is inspirational. They did it, it was a project for the school they were going to. The unfolding of the steps to get it on Broadway is equally interesting in itself. Much easier the process was than what usually occurs in getting plays on Broadway. It's almost as if those irreverent, plain-speaking, badass queens were helping to get it, and their voices out there through the centuries to us. If you have listened to my previous video and my most recent blog, I've been all about trying to define, understand, finding out what the sacred feminine is that I've been hearing so much about. I announced it as my new project, my calling. And now I'm thinking, what was I thinking? I talked about and wrote about going on a stay-at-home pilgrimage of discovery and taking you with me. And I am, and that's what this is about. But here I am talking about New York City and a Broadway play. Why is that, Susanna, you might ask? Well, if turning the tables on Henry and bringing the focus onto the wives instead of on that sleazy guy, I must say, isn't about raising the awareness of the feminine, then I don't know what is. And we were there to celebrate my granddaughter's 12th birthday, and how happy I was to give her this introduction to 6 very feisty queens celebrating themselves and more. But I don't want to spoil anything for you, so I'm stopping there. So what I thought I had begun last time was what I was calling a sacred journey. But even though the church is intimately involved with Henry and his wives, is it ever? His story is anything but representative of the sacred feminine. In fact, you could say it's all about disregard for the feminine. But this particular telling, this musical, certainly is. It has to do with an emerging consciousness of the feminine. which is happening now, which has been happening for the past 60 or more years, which causes people to see old stories, old paradigms, old ingrained practices, ways of being in a new way. It recognizes, values, lifts up the feminine. So I'm learning that our talk about the sacred feminine is about the rise of the feminine principle or feminine values. And I am still, believe me, disentangling all the pieces of this huge topic. Anne Baring, author of The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul and the Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image, which she wrote with Jules Cashford. Let me say that again so it's clearer. Anne Baring is the author of The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. And she also wrote The Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image, which she wrote with Jules Cashford. Anne has written several other books. She is probably, Anne Baring is probably the premier voice of the divine feminine, or what the divine feminine is about. She says the word feminine stands for the soul and the unseen cosmic web of life that connects each of us to all others and to the life of the planet and the greater life of the cosmos. In other words, all life, including the earth, the cosmos, ourselves, nature. She tells us in A Quest for the Soul, her book, that we are right now birthing, or have been, again, I think she says around 60 years it's been coming and happening, that we are birthing a resurgence of the feminine. And she sees that in these things. These are the indicators for her. The growth of the environmental movement, the determination of women in every culture to free themselves from their long oppression and encourage their increased participation in society. She sees it in the interest in the so-called non-rational, in the many new approaches to both psyche, and body, in the mounting revulsion, her word, for our weapons of mass destruction, in compassion for the helpless victims of our addiction to war, and in the engagement of hundreds of thousands of people in the work of helping both the planet and the victims of oppression. All these, she says, are different channels of influence, creating new perspectives on life, new ways of connection that bring together body, soul, mind, and spirit, all those aspects. And the recovery of the feminine, she writes, invites a reorientation of consciousness, a receptivity not only to the events occurring in the external world, but to the long ignored voice of the soul. So within us and with outside of us, a reorientation of what consciousness is. And so she speaks of soul differently. She gives it a wider, broader definition. And believe me, I'm just grasping this. But what she means by soul is she understands it as the feminine archetype or principle, which no longer is just related to a goddess figure, but the feminine aspect of all life. And perhaps a good way to look at it is as the yin compared to the masculine yang, where in Eastern religion, yin and yang exists in everything. So she recognizes a cosmic dimension of soul as an unrecognized order of reality, that we have not seen it as such, this broader definition. And she says it binds together all aspects of life, both visible and invisible. So reading her work and thinking about this, it just underscores how much I don't know. In comparison, and I know I'm always teaching, don't compare, and I believe that. But in comparison, my little foray into the heroine's journey is such a small beginning step into what Anne presents, her vision and her understanding. But I'm going to give myself a break and do what I invite you to do. Is we only know how much we know at the time, and good that I have started and took that first step. And I didn't even know of her, of Anne Baring, until a year ago when my friend and colleague Blanca Vergara in the Netherlands honored me, and truly honored me, with an invitation to be one of the presenters in her online summit, 3-day summit called From Wounds to Wings Summit, all about the divine feminine. And now that I've read more, I'm awestruck that my name was listed with Anne's. And as overwhelming as all of it is, I'm just so glad I decided on this project and on this pilgrimage sitting in my office that I'm on with you. And let me just share with you that Baring's book is 537 pages, and her book about the goddess, the myth of the goddess, 679. So I have some reading to do. And now I am just touching on her message when I say that what she's telling us is that a huge birthing is going on now in the collective soul of humanity. That it's an amazing and monumental time to be alive because of this. But it's also a scary one, because whenever change is happening, there is fear that things are different, and there's defensiveness because of that fear. So she writes, quote, "We are awakening to what I have called the dream of the cosmos, the dream of an enlightened humanity engaging in a new role on this planet, a role that is in harmony with the evolutionary intention of the cosmos and is no longer driven by the quest for power, conquest, and control, and the appropriation of the Earth's resources for the benefit of a few." So she uses and of course, I think you know I love using fairy tales and find a lot of important messages within them. She uses the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty to describe humanity's state, humanity and the earth. She sees the prince as the personification of the questing and rational human mind, out exploring, searching. She sees the princess as the principle of soul, the feminine aspect. These two aspects of the whole are calling, she says, to be rebalanced. She says, we have lost the feminine dimension of soul, personified by the Sleeping Beauty. And she says, when we are not in touch with the soul, it is as if a vital part of us is asleep. It cannot communicate with us, nor we with it. We cannot live to the fullest potential of which we are capable. And just think about the stories about the indigenous peoples who were always, and still are, communicating with the land, communicating with the trees, communicating with the earth. And we've lost that ability. She calls then for a marriage between our head and our heart, between our too literal, analytical mind, which knows nothing about this deeper ground of consciousness, though it thinks it knows everything, and connecting it with our imaginative, instinctual, creative soul, which is about feeling and intuition and the imagination, which puts us in touch with a ground which is beyond the reach of mind and intellect. Well, everyone, this may be a journey I don't come home from for years. We might be talking about this for a long time. Anne Baring took 20 years to write this book, what is called her magnum opus, and I've barely scratched the surface. So where to next on this pilgrimage? I'm letting my intuition feed me during the week as to where I go next. I have rearranged my books. I have a whole shelf now that's devoted to this topic because as I told you the last time, I've been collecting sacred feminine related books for a long time. So I think, though, I'm going to do more Anne Baring. I want to understand how we lost the feminine, the soul part of the equation in the first place. And then I have to understand how we get it back, because I'll tell you, the writers like Anne who talk about this stuff and connect the re-emergence of the feminine principle with the health, the very health and survival of our planet, they feel that there's no time to lose. So thank you for listening to me today. And thank you for being witness to my newness and learning as I part the branches and find my way on this path of pilgrimage. And I hope you'll join me the next time as we talk more about the sacred feminine and what that is. Thank you.